Uncivilized Vitality, and this is a quick video about logic. Okay, let's talk about logic. Well, briefly about what logic is and introduction to this. I'm going to do, this was kind of requested, we're going to do a short video series about logic, and this basically falls under community, vital path, community number 2, which is communicate on purpose. All right. And this is where our study of logic comes in to Uncivilized Vitality, and hopefully this video will start to explain why. So you can think of communicating between people. Communicating on purpose is a vital skill. It's a vital part of being sane and healthy and happy, and talking to other people. And a big part of that, which you might not even realize, is the use of logic and for your clear communication. I think it was Aristotle. Man is a rational animal. Man is the rational animal. Obviously woman, meaning humankind, we are the rational animal. That's the shortest definition of a human you can have, according to Aristotle. I think it was Aristotle. You could look that up. It's because we use reason and we communicate rationally. And the way we do that is through our inbuilt logical thought. But then after you get past a certain age, logic can go, or your reasoning can go in different ways. So you have to learn how to communicate reasonably with someone. And this will be, this just can be a short overview series. We're not going to get into it too much, but let's start with logic is going to deal with your reason and your rational capacity for human knowledge. And you can think of knowledge, just basic knowledge, as having 3 parts. It is an object, or objective fact, we can call it. So there is something that exists, like water exists. So water is a thing that exists. Then we have an idea of it. So we have this also called a concept, or a percept, a concept of water. We have an idea of water, and then we have to have a word for it. Right? We have to have a word for it. In this case, water. Right? That's the most fundamental explanation of what knowledge is, how we know things, how we gather knowledge. Something has to exist. There has to be an objective fact. There is dihydrogen oxide. There is water. And then we have a concept of it. This is where we, like our experience of it, you know, it's wet, it's liquid, it's, you know, whatever. And then we have to match a word for it. And we've come up with this word. And this, of course, will depend on the language that you're using, like, you know, English or French or Chinese. And these are the most fundamental parts of human knowledge. So now that I have water exists, and I have an idea of water, and I have a word for water, the reason that words are important is because I can't move ideas from mind to mind, right? So I can't move directly from this brain over to someone else's brain. I can't take the idea of water and move it directly over. That doesn't work. So, unless you're psychic, which no one actually is. So we have to match a word to water and use the word to get that idea across. And of course, early on, in early human existence or development, that took a bit of doing, right? We had to keep making these same noises, enunciating these same noises, water, and getting the other person to accept the idea or match their concept of water with my concept of water by sharing that word. So matching an idea to a word is the most basic part of communication, right? That's the first part, the most basic part of communication. Most basic step is matching words to ideas. All right? So it's going to depend on the language you speak, the vocabulary of the two people being involved. Like obviously you're not going to be able to communicate, match your words as effectively as between an adult, maybe a 10-year-old. They just don't have the vocabulary to accept that yet. They can't use their context cues and their ability to sort these things out to get the concept into their mind from your words, unless they have a wide variety of words to use, like a large vocabulary. And then you have to not only have the proper language and about the same vocabulary level, your choice of words will depend on less you, more the audience. So the words you're using, you want to avoid two things. You don't want to talk down to people, but you don't want to talk over their heads either. Neither one is effective communication. You have to understand who you're talking to, right? Communicate on purpose. What audience are you addressing? Is this an intimate one-to-one conversation? Are you addressing a crowd? Are you trying to address a professional colleague? Are you talking to the public in general? Are you one of 99.9% of humanity that can't help themselves but make comments online constantly? Communicating on purpose involves knowing your audience, and then taking the most basic step is matching words to ideas, using the proper words, the proper expression of these ideas to your audience. Besides not talking down to people or not talking over their heads, there are three things you really should avoid with direct or healthy communication. Avoid using, for your words, avoid using vague words, right? Vague from the Latin vagus, like your vagus nerve, right? Cranial nerve 10, because that cranial nerve wanders all over. Vagabond, right? Like somebody that wanders all over. So vague comes from Vegas, which means to, not like Las Vegas, but vagus, like your vagal nerve, means to wander around. So you don't want to be vague. Don't say a word that could mean so many different things to so many different people, and it sort of avoids the point. Try to be precise. Don't use words that are ambiguous if you can help it. Try not to be ambiguous. Certain words can have be spelled the same and sound the same, but have two different meanings depending on how they're used. A word can have two different meanings depending on the context it's used in, two or three or more different meanings. So try to avoid those words. Ambiguous words would require the audience, the other person, to figure out, I know what word he's using, but what concept is he trying to match that to? So avoid ambiguous language. Avoid being evasive. Okay? Avoid being evasive. Now, let's see. Grammar, logic, and rhetoric. These are the three, the trivium, or the primary liberal arts, right? So grammar, logic, and rhetoric. This is a classical education up here. And it basically composed of grammar, which was knowledge, right? So grammar consisted, like early grammar schools, or when you're first starting out, you're learning things. Grammar education consists of gathering knowledge. That's what grammar is. Learning about objective facts, things like water exists. The basic example that usually comes is a dog. A dog exists. A dog is a thing. It's a real thing. It's an objective fact. There are dogs. And then I have an idea or a concept of a dog. Dog's not a cat. Dog's not a camel. Dog's not a person. You know, a dog is a dog. And I get a concept, and then I've attached the word dog to it. So grammar is that part of your education where you're gathering an extensive and precise vocabulary. The more precise words, the greater number of words you have, the more precise those words are, the more facile you are with your words, the better you are at matching words to concepts, and then judging your audience so you can communicate on purpose. Okay? Then logic is learning how to apply your knowledge. All right? It's also going to be about truth. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Right? All right? And then that would be learning how to use your knowledge, i.e. using your precise words to fit to your concepts and deliver that idea to another mind with your words, avoiding being vague, ambiguous, evasive. And then you get to rhetoric, and so this is how it works. And then the rhetoric is the skill of communicating, because there's avoiding being vague, ambiguous, evasive, matching the proper word to the idea in your proper audience. A lot of that is rhetoric. Now, rhetoric gets a bad name, usually from me, when I talk about politicians and overly civilized people, sophisticated people. That goes back to the sophists in Socrates' times, who were teachers that used rhetoric to educate people. But they wouldn't educate as much on logic, how these things worked, and grammar. They just stayed with the rhetoric. They said they used evasive, ambiguous, and vague language to educate and sound smarter than they were, or to manipulate someone who was less knowledgeable about how things worked, manipulate them to their point of view. So sophisticated language, overly civilized language, misused rhetoric would be those two things I said earlier, where you're talking down to someone or you're talking over their head on purpose to attain your own goals. Your goal is not communicating on purpose, it's using rhetoric in a, let's just say, in an immoral way for right now, and then we'll move on. So logic, so once you've gotten a lot of grammar and you've learned lots of words and you have an extensive vocabulary and you've fitted those words to objective facts, you're going to have to learn to use logic. And logic is concerned with truth. And there are two forms of truth. Okay? There's ontological truth, and there is logical truth. So there's two forms, right? Two forms of truth. Okay? The ontological truth is the most basic idea of truth that there is. It means that something exists. If it exists, it's true in the sense that there are, for instance, I said dogs. There are dogs. There are different kinds of dogs, but dog is a thing. Dog is not just an idea in my mind. I didn't imagine dogs, but dogs are objectively true. I have a dog. I've had dogs. I know people with dogs. I've seen dogs. People know what I mean when I make the sound dog, if we speak English. Can't think of dog in any other language right now. We can do. But people know what that is. So dog is ontologically true. There is truth to dog. It exists. So because it exists as an objective fact, I can develop a concept of it and a word for it. So ontological truth is one form of truth. What we're going to talk about in this video series, possibly, is logical truth. Logical truth is concerned with matching the objective truth or falsity of a statement to objective reality. Okay? So it's really concerned with the truth of statements. And I'll unpack this in later videos if there's interest, which I'll ask at the end. So a statement is let's call it a sentence or a series of words that I've expressed an idea with words that can either be true or false. It's either true or false, that statement. And I can verify the truth, the ontological fact of it, or the falsity. It doesn't match reality. Okay? And then logic is the science, the art, the process of determining the truth of those statements and their relationship to ontological or objective truth, with a whole host of techniques. There's formal logic, there's predicate logic, there's propositional logic. There's different forms. We'll go through all those. But logic in general, I'm talking about the logic that maybe the Stoic philosophy kind of made the most famous when they talked about logic, physics, and ethics. So truth is ontological and logical truth. Statements can either be true or false. And when I say true, I mean ontologically. Something does exist. There's an idea of it. I have a word for it. And then we won't get into rhetoric much, but the logical statement will help you sort things out, or being able to use logic to get the truth or falsity of your statements is going to be important, because that helps you avoid deceptive language. Not necessarily vague, ambiguous, or evasive. Sometimes people will use purposely deceptive language or deceptive words. This is when they say something like, when they call a dog a cat. When someone points at an animal, which is clearly a dog, you have a concept of dog, the word for it, you know that dogs exist, you have knowledge of what a dog is. And someone says, no, that's a cat. Right? They're making a statement, that's a cat. That's deceptive use of language. And that kind of rhetoric, if you can continually change the meaning of words, remember words have to be precise, that's the most basic step in proper effective communication, is matching words precisely to ideas and then sticking with it. You can't call a dog a cat. Dogs can't become cats. Cats can't become dogs. This is going to go to first principles, which we'll talk about in a second. So that's not vague, ambiguous, or evasive. That type of rhetoric is purposely deceptive. And again, that's because someone's trying to get something out of you by using improper communication or immoral rhetoric. And the way that you catch that is by understanding how to use logic to test whether those statements are ontologically true. All right, so let's just erase some of this. So how do you do that? We'll go through that, the how, to use logic to see if someone's telling the truth, to find out if it's logically true. And we'll go through maybe the correspondence theory of truth, the coherence theory of truth. We'll go through those in later videos, and we'll do some basic logic, go through like syllogisms and different formal logic and stuff, but I'm just trying to keep this fairly light and easy at the first part. One of the things that you're going to do or have to understand first is first principles. Right? First principles, sometimes called laws. Right? So there are first principles. How do you determine just from simple statements or words whether something is objectively true or not? Several things you have to go through. It's going to be this video series getting out of hand already. Let's just talk about first principles. There are a few first principles, meaning I don't have to make deductions all the way back to these statements. This is where I said in another video, actually I don't know if this was, I think that was for the members only. We talked about geometry being a good thing to study when you're trying to learn logic. Let's go through the first one. The first one is the law of identity. The law of identity. That says a thing is what it is. That sounds funny. It is what it is. I am what I am. A dog is a dog. It's just objectively real. That's what it is. If it was different, it wouldn't be a dog. So if it was a cat, it would be a cat. But because it's a dog, it's a dog. The law of identity. A thing is what it is. These are first principles because you can't prove them. You can't prove or disprove them. They are what is called self-evident. This is the sort of thing that if you think about it long enough, you say, well, yeah, of course a dog is a dog. If it was not a dog, meaning it had claws and a slightly different face and it was still four-legged and furry, but it had a tail, but was a cat, it would be a cat. A chair is a chair. Water is water. The earth is the earth. Things are what they are. That is their nature. We can go through the different types of essence and that sort of thing, but I don't want to get too deep in this. Take some logic courses or classes or read some books if you want to go into that sort of thing, if you like it. But the basic law of identity as a first principle says a thing is what it is. That's an objective fact. It is not the logical truth. Next, there is the law of the excluded middle. The law of the excluded middle. Okay? This means something either exists or it doesn't exist. There's no middle ground. It either is or it isn't. A dog either is or it isn't. There's no middle. You either have, it's basically between being and non-being. So you're getting down to, again, going back to ontological truth being objective reality, objective truth. As a side note, there is such a thing as subjective truth, and this has been misunderstood, I think, the last couple generations, at least the last 15 years. People have started saying really dumb shit, like, I don't think I should say that, bleep it. Okay, maybe Rendell can bleep that. People will say, well, that's my truth or my lived experience. They're conflating an idea that they may be vaguely understood. Subjective truth means it is true for that being. Like if I have a headache, that headache is true for me because I'm the only one that can experience it. I'm the only one that it exists for, that it is objectively true for me, the subject. I'm the only one. There's no way to show you or prove to you that my headache exists. So that's a subjective truth. It doesn't mean, well, I believe Christopher Columbus was a bad guy, or I believe Christopher Columbus was a great guy. Those aren't subjective truths. Those are ambiguous truths, and you'd have to be very precise. Like, what do you mean by bad guy? What do you mean by good guy? What do you mean Christopher Columbus was ugly? What do you mean Christopher Columbus was a handsome dude? Those are examples of evasive language. You got to be very precise, otherwise you end up arguing about the wrong thing, right? So, how did I get to that? The law of the excluded middle means a thing cannot both be and not be at the same time. This will be important in a little bit. That should be as self-evident to everybody. Again, because these are first principles, they should be self-evident. A thing is what it is, and it cannot both be and not be at the same time, right? Oh, we went off on a little tangent about subjective versus objective truth. We're talking about objective fact or truth or reality here. All right. The other first principle besides the law of identity, law of excluded middle, would be the law of contradiction. All right. The law of contradiction. Contradiction coming from the Latin contra and dicere, meaning to speak against or against speak. This means something can't be both true and not true. Don't get that confused with the law of the excluded middle. This is about being. It either exists or it doesn't exist. And it has to exist as an objective fact before we can build our knowledge on it, then a concept, then a word. The law of contradiction would be maybe down at the realm of the ideas and words. I can't say a statement is both true and not true at the same time. It's very similar to the excluded middle. You got to spend some time thinking about that. But this really just refers to statements. And that makes sense, right? I can't say that this board is both white and black, right? I can't say it can't be both at the same time. Because of the law of contradiction, if it is one, it cannot be the other. And we know that because we can go back to the law of identity. A whiteboard is a whiteboard. It is what it is, right? And it either exists as a whiteboard or it doesn't. So I can't say it's both whiteboard and a blackboard. Of course, there are going to be some people like to split hairs and say, well, there's white and there's black marker on it. Don't do that. We'll cover that later, right? That's the law of contradiction. Another first principle, it depends on where you study logic or how it's presented to you. Another one I think is fairly important is law of sufficient reason. Law of sufficient reason. This says that everything has a cause. We're not going into like the philosophical stance on this, but cause and effect. Everything exists as an effect of something else, right? Something happened to cause that. Everything has a cause. If you go back far enough, take this cause, it was an effect of a previous cause, which was an effect of a previous cause. Everything has a cause. The law of sufficient reason, I believe, should go with the first principles. A lot of times you get only the first three, but I think this is also self-evident. Everything has a cause. It's easy to see why, right? You can't have an effect, a phenomena, an event, an idea. Dogs didn't just, spring into dogness right away. There were, different animals that either was made as a dog or they evolved into dogs. That part's irrelevant for this discussion. So there's a law of sufficient reason. That seems to be self-evident. And everything we're going to go through in this series and learn how to build logical, both inductive and deductive, logical thinking, ordered, rational reasoning, which is based on these first principles. We'll keep referring back to those so that you can use your knowledge, which has, you know, the more words you know, the larger vocabulary, and the more skilled you are with picking the right word to the right idea to get that into someone else's brain and communicating to your audience, avoiding being vague, evasive, avoid being deceptive, avoid being ambiguous with your word choice. The more logically you communicate, the better your results, so that you can communicate on purpose. You'll be understood better, you will understand better, you can stay in the realm of objective ontological truth, right? Objective fact, not confusing or conflating it with subjective truth, which is something that's only true for the subject. All right, I said earlier, headache. If I have a headache, that's true for me. It's not necessarily true for you, whether or not I have a headache. I don't want to split hairs, but learning to use logic to deduce whether you're being told the truth about something, to avoid deceptive rhetoric, which is used on us constantly by sophisticated civilization. It's constantly used to frame your worldview or to manipulate you into working against your own interests. We'll talk about that. You desperately need to be able to think and reason logically. So we'll do this short video series. I don't know how short. Maybe I'll do one a month for the next few months, and we'll get about the basics of logic. If there are, if there's an interest in this, leave some comments below, like yes, this is interesting, or no, go back to tying knots, Morey. Let us know, and we'll keep these videos coming. And if you enjoyed that, buy me a coffee, help us support the channel and the ULF, and like, share, subscribe, and what else? Think about these first principles and the things we wrote on there earlier. I know that I went kind of fast because I tend to talk fast, but you can always, YouTube, you can always pause and go back and look at that again. So there's our first video in a short logic series, because there was some interest in that. If the rest of the channel and followers have some interest in it, we'll keep doing it. We'll even talk about how logic can be tied into your outdoor and your field craft, learning to think logically, rationally about maybe the gear you're going to use or what you're going to get into and how to solve problems by thinking logically. But besides that, it is the basis of community number 2, communicate on purpose. All right. Hopefully that was a helpful video. That's it.